What evil prank have you pulled off? I used to work for a cruise line. A passenger asked if the crew lives on the ship full time. I and my co-worker explained that no, the crew leaves every night to fly back to Miami and then returns each morning. She walked away satisfied. After that cruise was over, our manager was sharing the passenger evaluations with us and was confused about one in particular. It was a woman who had stayed on deck 14 and had complained that she couldn't sleep at night because of the noise of the crew helicopter. Fact 1. 1,200 crew do not leave every night, but do live on the ship. Fact 2. That ship didn't even have a helipad. Question. WTF was she hearing every night? Gradually over the course of 2 weeks moved my coworker's monitors closer to the front edge of the desk, like 1/4 inches per move, until they were so close the keyboard barely fit. Stupid small desk, she grumbled, near the end. I then moved them back, just as slowly, over a few weeks. She never caught on. Over a decade ago I worked in the warehouse of a guitar center. We dealt with inventory, shipping and receiving. We had a dumpster behind the store in a shared parking lot that people would leave random things in, even though it was not a public dumpster. One day we found a broken beach chair in an open cardboard box. The box had a shipping label on it. It was left in such a way that it was easy to assume that the chair/box combo was left by the same person. We packed the beach chair in another box and shipped it back to the customer. I wish I was there to see the person's face when they received their trash back via UPS. My mum's laptop wallpaper was a picture of her granddaughter. I copied the picture 100 times and made her wallpaper a slideshow of the same picture over and over again, so the file would change but nothing would change visibly on the monitor. The pictures would change every 10 seconds. On one of the images I painted a tiny little curly mustache on her. So randomly for 10 seconds my niece would have a mustache. My mum thought she was either losing her mind or had a computer virus, and every time the mustache popped up, it was gone by the time she tried to show anyone. I did something similar to a college friend. I replaced a single system sound file, the click for the mouse, with a 5-minute version. It started off identical, followed by 4 minutes and 50 seconds of silence, but at the end, it had me screaming. Now if another system sound would play, it stopped playing the previous sound. So he would use his computer, and then when he would walk away, it might scream 5 minutes later. One year, my sister had to move back into my parents' house. I was like 15, she was a little older, mid-20s. April Fool's comes, and I know my sister woke up at like 6 AM. So I took out the light in the kitchen, put Vaseline all on the refrigerator handle, and put a rubber band around the water gun on the sink. I waited for her to go in the kitchen. I was in my room pretending to be asleep, and all I heard was shit, followed by a shit, followed by her screaming my name, and waking up my parents. My parents were not happy. Floor was soaked with water, and it woke both of them up. I'd do it again though. Edit, water gun thing. There is a small little black sprayer to the right of the sink. You pull it out, it has a hose connected to it, and you can spray down dishes and such. Not a prank I pulled off, but one I was victim to. My manager had left me in charge of the store when I was 16. Not legal, but that's a whole other mess. For a whole weekend. Saturday went well, and I was happy with how I went, although my paranoid brain is always concerned about whether or not doors are actually locked. I'm the same with my house, but the store was worse. So I make my dad drive down to the store to double check that everything is okay. 15 minutes later I get a phone call from him saying manager and the police are here because the door was unlocked and people were inside. Cue to me on the floor in tears hyperventilating while my dad is telling my mum, who had since picked up the phone, that he was only kidding and that everything was fine. One that was played on me. I took my SATs, college entrance exams, for those outside the US, on April 1st. Should have known right. But apparently, I'm not that smart. That night I went out with a group of friends, and when I got home my mom met me with a serious look on her face. She told me that the testing committee had called, that there had been an error and all test papers from that day were lost. Everyone was being contacted to schedule a date to retake the exam. She totally sold it. Face, reactions, everything. I bought it hook, line, and sinker. and she let me believe it until lunchtime the next day. My mom is a diabolical person. Working in a hot factory, supervisor, and job planner in this enclosed cubicle with a window AC unit in the middle of the shop, a nice 68 asterisk in there, while we sweat our ass off in 95 110 asterisk F heat. Kinda hot and pissy and always flies around. I kept grabbing the flies alive, walking into the cubicle to ask a usually legit question, or say I'm just cooling off, and opening my hand behind my back. I put 14 of those fuckers in there in one shift. He never did catch on I was doing it, and the planner was pissed swatting around. There were so many flies in there. Supervisor was cleaning out every crevice thinking some food is supporting life now somewhere. I used to work at a science tutoring center when I was in college in my gap year before professional school. One of the things we taught very often was anatomy. So naturally we acquired a few skeletons and various skulls with some variation in how they looked or were marked, etc. Well, I was closing one night and I knew my co-worker was opening the next morning early, so before I locked up I assorted all of the skeletons and skulls in a welcome party near the front door. I had one immediately at the opening of the only door into the room with several backup skeletons and skulls just behind at a table together watching on. The best part was that you have to turn on the lights manually, and that switches immediately to the side of the door opening, so when she reached down to turn on the lights she had to come face to face with some lifeless skeleton skull in the middle of the shady opening. Needless to say she screamed, and it was loud enough to make our boss come to see if she was okay. Woke up to some colorful texts from Mayo. Still proud of that one honestly. I got pranked. Does that count? Was at a house party at my then girlfriend's place. She knew me really well and knew that I've got a fairly competitive spirit. The place is really dark. She turns to me in the dim light and says my name. I bet you can't fit an orange in your mouth and eat it all in one bite. Wasn't about to say no to a challenge, so I took her up on it, only it wasn't an orange that she'd peeled but a lemon. I worked at a fast food where the boss was too cheap to get AC installed. In the super hot summer days we would all sweat so much that we could wring sweat out of our uniforms. There was this boy who I had a love-hate relationship with. We would always prank each other but mine were always tame, until one day he left his drink in the back while he was flipping burgers. I grabbed a Vinegar packet, cut open a corner, and put a straw directly into it, and exchanged it with the straw from his drink. Moments later, I was in the front of the store, and I heard him spit and scream my name while calling me a bitch. He still high-fived me. A friend kept trying to steal my sushi off my plate at a sushi restaurant. So while she wasn't looking I stuffed it full of wasabi, put a bit of fish back on top to cover my tracks, and pretended to not be looking. When she started reaching towards it, she tossed it into her mouth, started chewing down, and I just swung my head towards her to say you fucked up. 5 minutes of coughing, muffled screaming, and copious amounts of water later, she had learned her lesson. My best friend and I were roommates for a few years, and sometimes, when I was drunk I liked to draw comics of caricatures of the two of us. They were usually on pizza boxes and I would leave them outside of his room, so it would be one of the first things he saw the next day. Here is an album of most of them with explanations and another one that needed its own album because of multiple panels. Eventually he and his girlfriend decided to get their own apartment together closer to their jobs, so our time as roommates had come to an end. I decided to leave him one last parting gift on one of our last nights together. He left his wallet out on the coffee table, so I took his ID and taped on little drawings of him where the pictures typically go. A few months later I hear from him about it. Him and his girlfriend were visiting some friends out of state, and they were going to this bar. Apparently he handed his ID over to the bouncer like that, and the dude laughed at him because of how ridiculous it was. I was honestly surprised it worked. I totally expected him to notice way before that, but I guess he didn't. When my brother and I were in middle school, my brother liked to skateboard with our next door neighbor. One day, my brother and the neighbor took the sheet of plywood from under my brother's upper bunk bed. No one slept in the upper bunk, out of the house, and started making a skateboard ramp out of it in the neighbor's adjacent yard. My parents had explicitly told him that he wasn't allowed to do that. Now, in my defense, my brother teased me unmercifully, to the point of tears, on multiple occasions, so keep in mind that he had had it coming for a long time. Anyway, an evil little plan hatched in my brain. I ran to the upstairs window and yelled down at them, "Brother's name, guess what? Mom knows everything and she is SOOO mad." Then I slammed the window shut and ran to the stairs and waited while watching my mom read the newspaper. A few moments later, my brother walks in the front door looking worried and says, "Mom, I'm so sorry." My mom, who had no idea what was going on, said, "About what?" While slowly putting the newspaper down. "For making a skateboard ramp out of the wood from the bunk bed." "You did what?" At that moment, a wave of shock and realization swept across my brother's face and our eyes met. I let out the biggest evilest little sister cackle and ran into my room. We are adults now and still laugh about it from time to time.